My name is Aria Montgomery, and there are wounds that never truly heal. There are words that echo through your soul for decades, reshaping everything you believed about love, family, and worth. I will never forget the day my own sister looked me in the eye and called my unborn baby unwanted. The memory still haunts me with crystal clarity. I was 23 years old, standing in my childhood kitchen where I had shared countless meals and dreams with my family. My hands were trembling as I held the positive pregnancy test, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. I was terrified but filled with an inexplicable hope that maybe, just maybe, my family would embrace this news. Maybe they would see past my mistakes and help me welcome this precious life growing inside me. How naive I was. The silence after my announcement was deafening. My mother's face went pale as winter snow. My father's jaw clenched so tight I thought it might shatter. But it was my older sister, Victoria, whose reaction would scar my soul forever. Victoria had always been the golden child. Perfect grades, perfect job, perfect marriage, perfect house with the white picket fence. At 28, she had her life mapped out with military precision, and I was nothing more than the chaotic younger sister who continuously disappointed everyone. She stood up slowly from the kitchen table, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor like a countdown to my destruction. Her green eyes, once warm with sisterly affection, now burned with disgust and contempt. "Another mistake, Arya," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You cannot even take care of yourself. That child is unwanted. A burden that will destroy whatever pathetic excuse you call a life." The words hit me like physical blows, each syllable designed to wound, to break me down until I crumbled under the weight of her judgment. "You should think about everyone else before you ruin your life and embarrass this family further," Victoria continued, crossing her arms over her chest like a barrier against any argument I might offer. "That baby will grow up knowing it was not planned, not wanted, and certainly not loved the way it deserves." I remember holding my stomach protectively, my palms pressed against the slight curve where my miracle was growing. It was as if my baby could already hear the rejection, could already feel the coldness radiating from the people who should have been celebrating this new life. Tears burned my eyes like acid, threatening to spill down my cheeks and reveal just how deeply her words had penetrated my heart. But in that moment of absolute devastation, something fierce and protective awakened inside me. I made a silent promise that would sustain me through every dark night and lonely day that followed. "My child will be loved, even if I am the only one who believes in her worth." "You are wrong," I whispered, my voice barely audible but filled with determination. "This baby is wanted. This baby is loved. And I will prove every single one of you wrong." Victoria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the kitchen like breaking glass. "With what money, Arya? With what support? You are living in a fantasy world if you think you can handle motherhood." My parents said nothing. Their silence was perhaps more devastating than Victoria's cruel words. They simply sat there, letting her tear me apart without offering even a whisper of support or comfort. I left that house that night knowing I was truly alone. The family I had counted on, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had turned their backs on me when I needed them most. But I was not broken. I was determined. The months that followed were the most challenging of my entire existence. I moved into a tiny apartment on the wrong side of town, working 2 jobs to make ends meet while my body changed and grew heavy with new life. The loneliness was suffocating. There were nights when I would sit on my threadbare couch, rubbing my growing belly and wondering if Victoria had been right. Maybe I was making a terrible mistake. Maybe I was too young, too unprepared, too broken to be anyone's mother. But then I would feel a tiny kick, a gentle flutter that reminded me I was not alone. There was someone depending on me, someone who needed me to be strong and brave and fiercely protective. I read every parenting book I could afford. I attended prenatal classes by myself, surrounded by couples who held hands and planned nurseries while I scribbled notes in a worn notebook and dreamed of the day I would hold my baby in my arms. The birth was difficult. 36 hours of labor with only a kind nurse holding my hand when the pain became unbearable. There was no family in the waiting room, no celebration when my daughter finally arrived. But when they placed her on my chest, slippery and perfect and absolutely beautiful, nothing else mattered. She was 7 pounds and 4 ounces of pure miracle, with tiny fingers that wrapped around mine like she was claiming me as her own. I named her Hope, because that was exactly what she represented. Hope grew into everything I had dreamed she would become and more. She was bright and curious, with an infectious laugh that could light up the darkest rooms. She asked a million questions, painted masterpieces on our refrigerator, and told me bedtime stories about princesses who saved themselves. Those early years were not easy. Money was always tight, and I worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat. There were nights when I survived on peanut butter sandwiches, so Hope could have proper meals. There were times when I cried in the shower, exhausted and overwhelmed, wondering how I was going to make it through another day. But every morning, Hope would climb into my bed with her wild hair and sleepy eyes, wrapping her small arms around my neck and whispering, "Good morning, Mommy. I love you more than all the stars." Those moments made every sacrifice worthwhile. Victoria and I had no contact during those years. Occasionally, I would hear updates through mutual acquaintances. She had gotten promoted, bought a bigger house, taken exotic vacations with her husband. Her life seemed perfect from the outside, exactly as she had always planned. I tried not to feel bitter about the family gatherings I was not invited to, the holidays we spent alone while they celebrated without us. I focused on building a life filled with love and laughter, just Hope and me against the world. Hope excelled in school despite our modest circumstances. She was kind to everyone, from the popular kids to the outcasts who ate lunch alone. Teachers praised her compassion and intelligence. She volunteered at animal shelters and read to elderly residents at nursing homes. She was everything Victoria had said she would never be: wanted, loved, and absolutely extraordinary. When Hope turned 15, I felt a profound sense of pride in the young woman she was becoming. She had inherited my stubborn determination, but possessed a gentleness I had never managed to cultivate. She saw the good in everyone and believed that love could conquer any obstacle. I had built a successful career in graphic design, and we had moved to a better neighborhood. Hope was thriving in high school, talking excitedly about college applications, and her dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. Life was good. We were happy. And then everything changed. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in October, when my phone rang with news that would shatter the careful walls I had built around my heart. My mother's voice was shaking as she delivered the devastating information. Victoria had collapsed during a family gathering. She had been laughing at something my cousin said when suddenly she clutched her chest and crumpled to the floor like a marionette with severed strings. The paramedics had rushed her to the hospital, where a team of specialists delivered news that would reshape our entire family's understanding of mortality and miracles. Victoria had a rare genetic heart condition that had gone undiagnosed for years. Her heart was failing rapidly, and she needed a transplant if she was going to survive. The doctors explained that finding a compatible donor would be extraordinarily difficult. Victoria had a rare blood type and specific genetic markers that made matching organs nearly impossible to locate. Without a transplant, she had perhaps 6 months to live. I sat in my car outside Hope's school, gripping the steering wheel as my mother's words echoed in my mind. Part of me felt a terrible satisfaction. Karma had finally caught up with the woman who had called my child unwanted. Victoria, who had lived her perfect life looking down on everyone else, was finally facing something she could not control or fix with her money and connections. But beneath that bitter satisfaction was something deeper and more complicated. Grief for the sister I had once loved, fear for the family that was about to be torn apart, and a strange, inexplicable urge to help the woman who had hurt me so profoundly. Hope noticed my distress immediately when she got in the car. At 15, she had developed an uncanny ability to read my moods and emotions. "What happened, Mom?" she asked, buckling her seatbelt and studying my face with concern. "You look like someone died." I took a deep breath and told her everything. About Victoria's illness, about the family I had never really talked about the cruel words that had shaped our entire existence. Hope listened without interruption, her brown eyes growing wider with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had revealed. "She is your sister," Hope finally said, her voice soft but firm. "No matter what she said, no matter how much she hurt you, she is still family. We should help her if we can." My daughter's compassion never ceased to amaze me. Here was a 15-year-old girl who had just learned that her own aunt had called her unwanted before she was even born, and her first instinct was to offer help and forgiveness. "Hope, honey, it is not that simple," I said gently. "Victoria made it clear that we were not welcome in her life. She probably does not even want our help." "But what if we could save her?" Hope asked, turning in her seat to face me fully. "What if we could be the difference between life and death? Would not that be worth trying?" That night, I called the hospital to inquire about Victoria's condition. The nurse was hesitant to give information to someone not on the approved family list, but eventually confirmed that Victoria was stable but critical. I asked to speak with her doctor about the possibility of being tested as a potential organ donor. The nurse put me on hold, and I could hear muffled conversations in the background before she returned. "I am sorry," she said, her voice careful and professional. "The patient has specifically requested that you not be contacted or involved in her care in any way." Even facing death, Victoria was determined to shut me out. But Hope would not give up. Over the next few weeks, she researched everything she could about Victoria's condition, about organ donation, about the slim chances of finding a compatible donor through the National Registry. "Mom, I want to get tested," she announced one evening over dinner. "I know I am only 15, but I read that relatives have the best chance of being compatible. What if I could help her?" The idea terrified me. The thought of my daughter, my precious Hope, undergoing major surgery to help the woman who had rejected her existence was almost too much to bear. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Hope, I appreciate your heart, but you are too young to make that kind of decision. And even if you were older, I would not let you risk your health for someone who has shown us nothing but cruelty." Hope's eyes filled with tears, not tears of sadness, but tears of frustration and determination that reminded me painfully of myself at her age. "This is not about her, Mom," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is about doing what is right. This is about proving that love is stronger than hate, that forgiveness can heal wounds that seem impossible to repair." "She called you unwanted," I reminded her, my voice harsher than I intended. "She said you were a mistake, a burden. Why would you want to save someone who showed you such contempt?" Hope reached across the table and took my hand, her young fingers surprisingly strong and steady. "Because someone has to break the cycle," she said quietly. "Someone has to choose love instead of revenge. And maybe, just maybe, saving her life will show her that the child she called unwanted has more value than she ever imagined." The wisdom in my 15-year-old daughter's words left me speechless. Over the following days, Hope continued her research and her gentle campaign to convince me. She showed me statistics about organ donation, testimonials from families who had experienced the miracle of life-saving transplants, and stories of reconciliation that had grown from tragedy. "What if she dies, Mom?" Hope asked one night as I tucked her into bed. "What if she dies and we could have saved her but chose not to because of old hurts and broken pride? How would we live with that?" I could not sleep that night, tossing and turning as Hope's words echoed through my mind. I thought about Victoria as she had been when we were children, funny and protective, always looking out for her little sister. I remembered how she had held my hand during thunderstorms and taught me to ride a bicycle. Where had that loving sister gone? When had fear and judgment replaced compassion and understanding? The next morning, I made the call that would change everything. I would like to be tested as a potential donor for Victoria Montgomery. I told the transplant coordinator at the hospital. "I am her sister." There was a pause, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mrs. Montgomery has specifically requested that you not be involved in her care," the coordinator said carefully. "However, if you are determined to proceed with testing, we can process your application without her knowledge. If you prove to be a match, we would then need to address the situation with the patient." "Test me," I said without hesitation. "And test my daughter too. She is 15, but she is determined to help if she can." The testing process was extensive and emotionally draining. Blood draws, tissue typing, psychological evaluations, and medical histories that required me to relive details I had tried to forget. Hope was incredibly mature throughout the entire process, answering questions about her motivations and understanding of the risks with a wisdom that astounded the medical staff. 3 weeks later, we received news that would rock our world. Hope was a perfect match. Not just compatible, perfect. Her tissue type aligned with Victoria's so precisely that the transplant team called it extraordinary and miraculous. I was also a potential match, but Hope's compatibility was so ideal that she would be the preferred donor if she chose to proceed. The transplant coordinator called us in for a meeting to discuss the implications and risks. Hope would need to undergo surgery to donate part of her liver, which would regenerate over time. There were risks involved as with any major surgery, but the team was confident in her young body's ability to recover fully. However, the coordinator said, looking at us both seriously, we need to address the elephant in the room. The patient has made it clear that she does not want contact with your family. If we proceed, she will need to be informed about the donor's identity. What happens if she refuses? I asked, my heart hammering with anxiety. She cannot refuse if she wants to live. The coordinator replied bluntly. Her condition has deteriorated significantly in the past few weeks. Without this transplant, she has perhaps 4 to 6 weeks left. The weight of that statement settled over us like a heavy blanket. Victoria was dying, and Hope, the child she had called Unwanted, was her only chance for survival. I want to do it, Hope said firmly. Whatever she said about me before, whatever she thinks of us now, I want to save her life. The coordinator scheduled us to meet with Victoria the following day. I spent the entire night pacing my bedroom, rehearsing what I would say to the sister who had cut me out of her life so completely. How do you face someone who rejected your child when that same child is offering to save their life? The hospital room was sterile and cold, filled with the constant beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell that seemed to permeate every surface. Victoria lay in the narrow bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. Her once perfect hair was thin and brittle. Her skin had a grayish pallor that spoke of failing organs, and dark circles under her eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent contemplating mortality. When she saw us enter, her eyes widened with shock and something that might have been fear. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "Victoria, this is Hope," I said, gently guiding my daughter closer to the bed. "Your niece. She is here to save your life." Victoria's gaze shifted to Hope, taking in her healthy complexion, her bright eyes, her confident posture. This was the child she had dismissed as unwanted, now grown into a beautiful young woman radiating compassion and strength. "I do not understand," Victoria said, confusion evident in her voice. Hope stepped forward, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. "Aunt Victoria, I know you said I was unwanted before I was born. I know you believed I would be a burden and a mistake. But I am here because I want to give you part of my liver so you can live." The silence that followed was profound and emotionally charged. Victoria stared at Hope as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not as an inconvenience or embarrassment, but as a living, breathing person with her own thoughts, feelings, and capacity for love. "Why?" Victoria whispered, tears beginning to spill down her pale cheeks. "Why would you want to help me after what I said?" Hope pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, her young face serious but gentle. "Because you are family," she said simply. "Because holding on to anger and hurt only creates more pain. Because I believe that people can change, that hearts can heal, and that love should always win." Victoria began to sob then, deep, wrenching sounds that seemed to come from the very core of her being. These were not tears of self-pity, but tears of recognition, remorse, and overwhelming gratitude. "I was so wrong," she gasped between sobs. "I was terrified and selfish and cruel. I thought I was protecting the family's reputation, but I was just protecting my own pride." I found myself crying too, years of hurt and loneliness finally finding their release. The sister I had mourned for so long was still there, buried beneath layers of fear and judgment, but still capable of growth and redemption. "I am sorry," Victoria whispered, reaching out a trembling hand toward Hope. "I am so sorry. You are not unwanted. You are extraordinary. You are a miracle I was too blind to see." Hope took her aunt's hand without hesitation, her young fingers wrapping around Victoria's fragile ones with gentle strength. "I forgive you," she said. and I could hear echoes of every prayer I had whispered over her crib, every hope I had harbored for her future. We all make mistakes. What matters is that we learn from them. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Those 7 days passed in a blur of medical preparations, emotional conversations, and family reconciliation that felt like something out of a dream. Victoria's husband, Marcus, visited us at home to express his gratitude and amazement. He admitted that Victoria had regretted her words for years, but had been too proud and ashamed to reach out. My parents came too, tears in their eyes as they met their granddaughter for the first time. They had been waiting for Victoria's permission to contact me, not wanting to betray her wishes, but deeply regretting the years they had missed. "We should have stood up for you," my mother said, holding Hope's face in her weathered hands. "We should have celebrated this beautiful child instead of letting fear and judgment silence our hearts." The night before surgery, Hope and I talked until dawn about life, love, forgiveness, and the mysterious ways that pain can sometimes lead to healing. "Are you scared?" I asked, stroking her hair as she lay with her head in my lap. "A little," she admitted, "but I am more excited than scared. Tomorrow, I get to save a life. How many people get that opportunity?" "She does not deserve you," I said, my voice thick with emotion and pride. "Maybe not," Hope replied with a wisdom that continued to astound me. "But love is not about what people deserve. Love is about what we choose to give, regardless of whether it will be returned or appreciated." The surgery lasted 8 hours. I paced the waiting room like a caged animal, alternating between prayer and panic as the minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Marcus sat with me, both of us united in our fear for the women we loved. He told me stories about Victoria's guilt over the years, about nights when she would cry and wonder about her niece, about the sister she missed but felt too ashamed to contact. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face was tired but triumphant. "Both patients are doing beautifully," he announced. "The transplant was successful, and Hope's recovery is proceeding exactly as we hoped. You should be very proud of your daughter. She is remarkably brave and resilient." I collapsed into a chair, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude that my precious child was safe. Over the next few days, both Hope and Victoria recovered with remarkable speed. Victoria's color returned, her strength began building back up, and the monitors showed her new liver functioning perfectly. Hope bounced back with the resilience of youth, joking with nurses and reading books to pass the time. She received dozens of cards and flowers from friends, teachers, and even strangers who had heard about her extraordinary act of compassion. The most powerful moment came a week after surgery, when Victoria was finally strong enough to walk to Hope's room. I watched through the doorway as my sister approached my daughter's bed, moving slowly but determinedly. Hope looked up from her book and smiled. Not a tentative or uncertain smile, but the radiant expression of someone who had found peace with her decision. "Thank you," Victoria whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Thank you for giving me life, but more than that, thank you for teaching me what real love looks like." Hope reached for her aunt's hand and squeezed it gently. "We are family," she said simply. "That is what family does." Victoria spent the next hour telling Hope stories about me as a child, sharing memories and family history that had been lost for so many years. She talked about our grandmother, who had always believed that every child was a blessing, regardless of circumstances. "She would have been so proud of you," Victoria told Hope, tears streaming down her face. "She would have seen what I was too foolish to recognize, that you are exactly the kind of person the world needs more of." As Hope healed and Victoria grew stronger, something beautiful began to bloom between them. They discovered shared interests in music and literature, similar senses of humor, and a deep capacity for understanding each other's perspectives. Victoria began visiting us regularly once she was released from the hospital. She brought gifts and stories, photo albums filled with family history that Hope had never seen, and most importantly, the love and acceptance that had been missing for so many years. My parents became frequent visitors too, determined to make up for lost time with the granddaughter they had missed watching grow up. They attended Hope's school events, celebrated her achievements, and marveled at the young woman she had become despite their absence. The hole in our family that had existed for 15 years slowly began to heal. But the most profound change was in Victoria herself. The near-death experience had stripped away her pride and pretense, revealing a woman capable of tremendous growth and genuine remorse. She started volunteering at a crisis pregnancy center, offering support and resources to young women facing unplanned pregnancies. She spoke openly about her mistakes, about the cruelty of her words, and about the redemption she had found through her niece's forgiveness. I spent so many years thinking I was protecting people by being harsh and judgmental, she told me one afternoon as we watched Hope practice piano. I thought I was preventing mistakes and disappointment, but all I was really doing was preventing love. 6 months after the surgery, Victoria threw Hope a sweet 16th birthday party that was more celebration than our small family had ever experienced. The house was filled with balloons, cake, laughter, and relatives who had finally learned what it meant to embrace love over judgment. As I watched Hope blow out her candles, surrounded by family who now recognized her worth, I thought about the promise I had made in that kitchen 16 years ago. I had vowed that my child would be loved, even if I was the only one who believed in her. But Hope had done something even more miraculous than I had imagined. She had not only survived the rejection and thrived despite it, she had transformed it into redemption. She had taken the word unwanted and rewritten it as invaluable. The woman who had once called my baby a burden now carried a part of my daughter inside her body, keeping her alive with every heartbeat. Victoria's life literally depended on the child she had dismissed as worthless. That evening, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, Victoria pulled me aside for a private conversation. "I need you to know," she said, her voice steady but emotional, "that Hope did not just save my life. She saved my soul. She showed me what forgiveness looks like, what unconditional love means, and what it truly means to be family." She paused, looking out the window at Hope, who was laughing with her cousins in the backyard. "I called her unwanted," Victoria continued, "but she is the most wanted person in this family now. She is our miracle, our teacher, our reminder that love can conquer even the deepest wounds." As I tucked Hope into bed that night, she seemed to glow with contentment and joy. The surgery scars on her abdomen were fading, but the emotional healing she had facilitated would last forever. "Are you happy we did it?" I asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "More than happy," she replied, smiling sleepily. "I am grateful. Grateful that I could save her, grateful that our family is whole again, and grateful that I learned how powerful forgiveness can be." "You taught us all that lesson," I said, kissing her forehead. "You showed us that the size of someone's heart matters more than the circumstances of their birth." "Mom," Hope said, her voice growing drowsy, "do you think Aunt Victoria really meant those things she said when I was born?" I considered the question carefully, wanting to be honest but also protective. "I think she was scared," I said finally. "I think she was young and worried about how other people would judge us. But fear made her say things that were not true and not kind." "I am glad she was wrong," Hope murmured, her eyes already closing. "I am glad I was wanted after all." "You were always wanted," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "You were wanted by me, you were wanted by God, and now you are wanted by everyone who knows you. You are the most wanted child who ever lived." As Hope drifted off to sleep, I sat in her darkened room thinking about the incredible journey we had traveled. From rejection to redemption, from isolation to integration, from wounds to healing. Victoria had called my baby unwanted, but years later, my child had saved her life in ways that went far beyond medical intervention. Hope had saved Victoria's capacity for love, her relationship with family, and her understanding of what really mattered in life. The child who was supposed to be a burden had become a blessing. The mistake had become a miracle. The unwanted baby had become the most valuable member of our family. Sometimes the very life that people condemn becomes the life that saves them. Sometimes the child they call unwanted grows up to be exactly what the world needs most. A living example of grace, forgiveness, and unconditional love. My daughter Hope proved that every life has value. Every child deserves love. And every family can find healing if they choose compassion over judgment. She was never unwanted. She was always exactly who she was meant to be. Our miracle in disguise, our teacher wrapped in the form of a child, our reminder that love always wins in the end. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of heartbreak, healing, and hope. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of resilience, family, and the transformative power of love. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all of the beauty and strength of the human spirit. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and let us know in the comments below how this story impacted you. We read every comment and are grateful for this amazing community of people who believe in the power of redemption and second chances.